Okay, Madam Mayor, it's 9:10 and we are live.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to the agenda meeting of February 14th, 2025. Can we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Betty Resch,
Here.
Vice Mayor Sarah Maliga,
Present.
Commissioner Christopher McVoy,
Here.
Commissioner Mimi May is absent, and Commissioner Reynaldo Diaz will be joining us
At some point.
At some point.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Let's well, it's the agenda meeting, so let's look at the agenda. Let's talk about whatever anybody has to talk about the agenda for Tuesday night.
I do have some things.
About the agenda?
Correct.
Oh, okay. What would you like to say?
Well, one of them, unfinished business, D says enter text here, which I'm not sure what that means.
What are you talking? Unfinished, well, wait, unfinished business B.
D is in dog.
D.
Delta, I guess the airline,
Yeah.
air folks.
Well, I'm looking at it. It's the one about.
I entered it. I downloaded it from the website earlier today, and my version says enter text here. Now, if you click on it, it does actually have some backup, but that's a little weird. That's all.
But I mean, it has the backup.
Yeah, but enter text here is a little obscure as to what that might be about.
Well, but I mean, you clicked it and it showed up, so hopefully people will be able to figure that out.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. It means that the staff report did not populate because the title comes directly from the staff report. So It means there was some snafu. So I will fix that right now.
Okay.
But backup is there, so that's good.
My more substantive concern is the item C, Charlie, discussion regarding valet parking in the downtown. I'm really concerned, and this is a long-standing concern, that if we're supposed to discuss things or make decisions on things, we really need to have, we and the public need to have backup information. So my understanding is that there's been concern probably for a while, but again recently, with how many businesses are setting up valet arrangements, how much space that's taking up of parking spaces. I don't have a dog in that fight one way or the other, but I think it's a valid discussion that we should have, and maybe we need to make some decisions about it. But wouldn't it seem almost goes without saying that the backup should say currently there are 5 businesses or 10 businesses or 2 businesses or whatever, and each business uses this much linear space on the road or this many parking spaces or this much square footage or something in some sort of units that the public can understand, and maybe there's some cost, they pay X amount for that or whatever. But basic information, it could include some background stuff that says, hey, here's how this works. It's an FDOT road, it's an FDOT sidewalk, but the way we do it is the businesses have an agreement with the city and they pay the city and then we give that to FDOT. That's background stuff, but some data on what the actual situation is, and perhaps some data on is that causing a problem for parking or whatever, and it's not there.
Well, I know a lot of us have, I mean, all right, understood. I mean, that's certainly valid, but it's a discussion, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. But on the other hand, there are a few of us, I think, that are fairly in contact with the downtown people that are more aware of it. But I don't disagree with what you're saying. But I don't think, I don't think that we should not do it because it's not there. Madam Mayor. Yes.
There is a crisis in this country of confidence in government. And for elected officials to say, well, some of us have discussions with somebody and we have that information, but it's not provided to the public and it's not provided to all the commission. that
It's an
does
open,
not
Chris, it's
inspire
an open
confidence.
discussion. It's just a discussion, okay?
It doesn't
I don't
matter.
disagree, but you make such a big deal out of it. I think that if we can
It
talk
is a
about
big
it.
deal. It is a big deal, and not necessarily the valet parking one way or the other. I don't know whether that's a big deal. The point is, if you're going to use up public time and elected official time, have the backup there so that everybody can look at it and say, oh, okay, I see what the situation is. They can offer, the public can offer input in and say,
All right,
well,
understood. Sarah, I see your hand is up.
Thank you,
You made
Madam
your point,
Chair.
Chris.
I just want to say that one of the things that I sent an email yesterday to Jamie, that now that FDOT has redone Lake and Lucerne, I think that it might behoove us to have the conversation of taking over Lake and Lucerne from the state like they had proposed years ago. And the reason that we didn't is because we didn't have the money for the upkeep and the infrastructure and the improvements. But now that that's been done, and if we really are going to implement a parking plan that's going to include all of the city, and we want to talk about things like cafe permits and valet parking, wouldn't it be a better sense for the city to have a conversation on taking over Lake and Lucerne and making that part of our decisions and not having to negotiate with the state on some level? Again, just a thought. And I would like to get some input on that, but I did bring that up to Jamie because of this conversation and the bigger conversations we have coming forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a thought. We can certainly talk about it. You know, Lake and Lucerne is always going to need more maintenance. It's not the kind of thing. It's not one and done. Jamie, how hard is it to deal with DOT?
Deal with them in what
I mean,
sense?
we're limited to this particular, because I have something about DOT a little bit later. Limited to, you know, this issue that she's talking about.
So as far as the valet, the sidewalk cafe permits aren't an issue. They're up on top of that. The issue with the valet is there really is no backup. We have basically two current valet like permits for valet per se, but it has not been enforced correctly. So to say that they have allocated two spaces, some people are taking up a full block, as you guys are all aware. So we're to a point now where it's time to start enforcing these. Those who don't have the permits, they need to start paying for them. And we
What
need to
two
have,
permits do we have? Excuse
so
me.
you've got the Rustico and you've got the Playhouse.
Rustico has an agreement with the city?
Rustico has an agreement where Shannon's pulling all that stuff right now. But
Okay.
again, this is something that historically has not been really enforced that well, as far as if you paid for the square footage for two spaces, which is 22 feet by 8 feet, then that's all you should have. There has really been no enforcement. We need to start doing that because they're taking up way too much parking now. So the discussion, why it's only a discussion item on there, is because as the vice mayor was mentioning, we're getting to a point now where if you've got the Playhouse and you've got Oceana Kitchen now on Lucerne, and you've got Rustic, and you've got Paradiso, maybe I don't know what Lula's wants to do. You've also got Dave's. If we had multiple venues downtown that started saying, hey, I want to do valet, we only have 5 blocks between Dixie and Federal and Lake and Lucerne. That could take a considerable amount of parking up. So we just need to have a kind of discussion of what do we want to do? Do we only want to max out and say, if you're going to do a valet downtown, you get 2 spaces. That's it. You can use one for stacking where a car can pull in, another one if you're not going to put your umbrella and your valet stand on the sidewalk, as long as it meets ADA. If you're going to put that in another space, how many spaces do we want to allocate to a particular business to do this? And it's gotten to a point where now it really needs to be a policy discussion, not just an operational one, because now we're talking about how the actual downtown is going to work. We just don't have a lot of space downtown. So again, and apologies to Commissioner McVoy, but we don't have a lot of this backup. A lot of this stuff hasn't been done in the past. It's just kind of been like, oh, if you want valet, just put in for this permit. But there's really been no restrictions on it.
Well, in terms of policy, last week I needed to mail something later in the evening, and I couldn't. There was like everything was blocked off because so God forbid I had to walk a block to go to the post office, right? I mean that's part of it. But it was pretty funny because after I mailed my stuff, I wondered who's doing this? What's all this? So I went to the Mixed Martial Arts Studio bravely stood there and asked them, don't hurt me. And they said it was Rustico. So I went and I spoke with Nino, who I'd never spoken with before. It was interesting because I said, it's kind of a lot. You're taking a lot of parking. And I said, could you, just kind of informally keep it to 3? And here's what he said. And I think this is where the policy comes in. And I think that we need to pay attention to this. And hopefully parking garage will help this. He gets calls. And when you think of Rustico, Paradiso, Lula's, these are Oceana. These are higher end restaurants. And they draw a crowd that is not, let's go down to Dave's and, eat some shrimp and drink some beer, right? Which God bless Dave's and all the others downtown. But it's a different crowd. And he said he'll get a phone call. Do you have valet parking? And if the answer is no, he doesn't get the customer. So I think, if part of our deal is to, and we can talk about this, actually Thursday is the business development board. So that might be a good
Correct.
opportunity to talk about this.
Which is why I wanted to bring this forward on Tuesday ahead of the
Helpful.
BAB meeting. So,
right. So, I mean, I think that, if we consider, one thing that we try to do is to be business friendly. And I think because it's only in the evening, it's only a problem at night. So I think if we want to promote our high end, we're kind of the food court of Palm Beach County from, everything from high end to low end. And that's part of our draw. And I think if we want to be business friendly, I think we need to have some kind of solution that the restaurants can have valet parking. Maybe it's, once the parking garage, we'll figure out something. It's too bad the person down at the corner of Lucerne and M or L has this giant empty parking lot. And apparently I have not spoken with them, but Jamie, you said they've been sort of unwilling to talk about anything, but maybe it's worth a try.
No, they provided us with a price if the city wanted to purchase. They initially wanted to sell both the building and the lot together,
right?
But they would break them apart. But that,
well, I'm talking about perhaps renting. I'm talking about because Nino told me it cost him $2,000 a month for that valet.
Mm-hmm.
So if a few restaurants got together and chipped in, maybe they could meet a temporary rental space from that person. So, I could reach out and just call the realtor and say, hey, is there any chance that we could do again, until the parking garage, which, I hope is going to come to fruition, is available and we have those extra slots. Because the museum slots aren't going to be used at night. I mean, that's the other thing, that where we park during the day and night are two different groups of people.
And I can talk to Joan as well. I know she's been in contact with that realtor because I know the CRA was looking at that as well. I know for a while they didn't want to break those two out because with Kana being gone, they were trying to keep those together because it's a better, obviously, selling point. So I'm not sure what the latest is on that because this was, I think, right after Kana exited that I had the conversation. So I can follow up with Joan and see if she's gotten any more recent information.
Okay, great.
But ultimately what it comes down to is it has not been enforced correctly. We need to start and make sure that we are putting a policy in place so that it's equal across the board and that we just figure out what we want to do downtown. So apologies for not being more backup. It's just one of those things that's currently broken that we need to fix. So I want to bring it forward so we can start fixing the situation. So
Ronaldo?
Thank you. I'm having all kinds of technology issues this morning, including the volume is super low, so I hope you guys can hear me okay.
Yes, we can.
Good. I actually, I'm looking forward to having this conversation. I actually had a talk with staff at the new Cantina Americano, and they expressed concern with that parking lot flooding. So they wanted to know if we can send someone to look at it. But also, according to them, and I don't know where it's going to end, but I guess if there's good news, that according to them, they're having talks about using that lot for their own kind of parking thing. And so if the owners of that lot are amenable to having a conversation, I actually brought up the idea of, what if Rustico worked out a deal and had some of those lots, and they said, maybe it's a possibility, but it's up to the owners, of course. But the conversation is being had at least.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I don't think that, I don't know that restaurant would fill up that whole lot. And there is such a need to, right? And I
Yeah.
mean, hope if it's great if it did, but hopefully, something that to me that seems to be the short-term solution if we can get our hands on that lot. Chris, I see your hands up.
Yeah, two things, two thoughts. Could we request for the discussion to have it be a bit more informed discussion, simply a list of how many parking spaces there are on street downtown on Lake and Lucerne between, say, Dixie and Federal, so that we know what the total number we're working with is, and then maybe some information on is it feasible, well, some information on how many different places are currently, whether they have leases or not, de facto doing valet parking, so that we just know what the situation is there, and then how many of them actually have leases. And the third piece, I think, would be, it was mentioned that you have a stand and an umbrella and things, which are important. How many of those could be done not using a second space, so that the valet parking would be restricted to one space?
They're on the sidewalk.
Some are,
umbrellas
some aren't, I think. Just some backup on that. Can everybody,
And
how
who's gonna
many
walk
spaces?
downtown and count the spaces?
Well, we'll keep in mind
Somebody
DOT's in the process of striping too, as well. So the standard DOT space for parallel parking is 22 feet long by 8 feet wide. I
Mhm.
know in the past, well, for one, most of those striping was completely worn off, which was one of the issues, that there weren't dedicated, like, defined spaces. So
Mhm.
someone would park and then someone might park like 6 feet in front of them, and so it wasn't actually striped out correctly because it was so worn. So then the process, now that they've repaved everything, of actually going back and redoing those. So I think that count might change a little bit from what it was before. Because it's just been, I think it was like 20 some years last time they even dealt with that. So I'm not
So
sure,
let's
like,
start,
I can measure it out and come up
It,
with.
right.
it, at least if we had some ballpark numbers on it, I think that would be helpful.
uh,
If it turns out there's 100 spaces and all the valet parking total that's desired uses 5, well, that's a 5% hit. Maybe that's not out of the range of things. If it's uses 20, a 20% hit would be, quite a different discussion, I think. So we should have some estimates, whether it's just measuring linear feet and dividing by 22 or whatever, an approximate but reasonable estimate. The other thought that's a little bit different scale is, I hear that across the US, most of the time when a developer comes to a community, they come with something in hand and say, hey, we'd like to build this, and we're willing to build you a parking lot, or we're willing to help build a fire station, or we're willing to help contribute to a school or something. And given that the new developments that we keep getting unsolicited proposals, they tend to ask us for something. It seems, since we have an issue with parking and road maintenance and things like that, perhaps we ought to consider asking them instead of simply rolling over when they ask us.
I'm not gonna simply roll over, but okay, that's a valid point. Let's talk about Lake and Lucerne for just a second. While we're in the neighborhood, they are doing a terrible job. Almost every day I get photographs of paver bricks that are like 3 inches below the grade. What I've been saying is, they're just wanted, which is not a great response, is, after street, they did a lot of stuff just to get street painting, but I'm very concerned about some of the situations downtown right now before street painting. I'm wondering if our extremely responsive Department of Transportation, Mr. Blaze or whatever, could address. I know there was a meeting about trees downtown. I don't know what happened with that, but I'm not just I'm not. Our citizens are very concerned about the conditions that are in place right now for street painting.
And I
Mr.
agree
Brown.
with you because they're all trip hazards and we're the ones
Oh,
who
it's
are.
awful. It's awful. So, Mr. Brown, what are we gonna do?
So I'm actually going to bring in a guest this morning. I'm going to call the Lifeline. Our project manager, Shannon Garcia, who deals with DOT on a daily basis. Hey, you're going to be a guest. Come on around. We're talking DOT and
People.
what needs to be done.
Hey,
Street
Shannon.
Painting Festival.
For the
Hi.
record, Mr. Diaz
What
has
is the latest on
Hi.
Street Painting Festival and what they're doing to pressure wash and get everything ready for?
So they were downtown yesterday, supposedly. I'm waiting, I'm going back down to inspect what they did. Pressure washing. He's supposed to be sending me photos. I just talked to him this morning. They're trying to get the thermoplastic striping finished. I told them, I said, listen, you have till Thursday to stripe. If not, you're done. Your striping is what it is until after. Pressure washing, I'm told him I need an end date as of today. So I'm going down there as soon as I'm done with what I'm doing this morning to inspect it and see where we're at. My only concern about their pressure washing is I don't think they're concerned as much with some of the stuff that we would be concerned with. Their concern is getting the dirt that they put on the sidewalk off. So I don't think they're gonna do a thorough pressure cleaning. So that's my only concern. So that's why I'm gonna go down in a little bit.
And all the paver bricks and everything, what she had mentioned.
trip
papers
hazards.
and-
There's some trip hazards I still need to address with them.
Okay.
So that's why I'm gonna go get all that information again too, because if they're not gonna get them settled, I'm gonna grab Joey and get those trip hazards resolved.
Oh, thank you. You know,
Yeah.
one thing, the French drain, like in front of the parking building, there's that long sort of French drain.
Yeah,
They're completely, every time I see it, little OCD I have, I want to take a knife and just go in there and cut because they're completely clogged. They
all
just
of them
become-
are. I've got to figure out who I can get to pressure wash those out to
Yeah.
get those drained.
Well, if pressure washing helps,
Yeah.
but I mean, they're really impacted.
Yeah,
But if you could, Shannon, if you could take care of that, yeah.
yeah.
Because it's dangerous down there, and
I was looking
God
at the one in
knows.
front of Dollar General and it's like.
it's horrible. Yeah.
Yep.
All of them.
So I just want to let everyone know, so Shannon is on top of all the, like, she's dealing with them on a daily basis. So,
Thank you, Shannon.
we've
No
been on it
problem.
because we're looking at this date, obviously, next week.
I'm
Um,
having a panic attack.
And we're a little concerned, but they've had this date for well over 2 years. Like, we gave them all of our event schedule and everything, so they've known exactly when this needed to be completed by. And we're kind of at this drop dead date where if we get to like Tuesday, Wednesday next week, we're gonna have to do something ourselves and back charge because
Absolutely.
Friday everything's shut down.
Right.
There is nothing, Friday morning everything gets shut down. So
You know, we're talking about valet parking, that the people have taken up spaces for valet parking. What DOT did to our downtown for those weeks where they would block off a whole block and, then wouldn't, I mean, I was getting a lot of phone calls from
Mhm.
the wine bar, the different people.
Yep.
There's no parking downtown, so very disrespectful. Chris?
Yeah, another one that relates to FDOT that I've heard from multiple businesses and can attest to myself is nasty smells coming out of the storm drains.
okay.
And
I think we're-
Yeah.
it's been various places. I wrote it to Yvonne, and she mentioned that those are FDOT storm drains, so they can't really do anything. I suggested that a number of businesses downtown suspect from the smell that there's a cross connection between the sanitary sewer and the storm drain. I don't know when it's FDOT and when you go far enough down, it's our pipes. But the bottom line is it can smell pretty bad in some places.
Where has
and
it been? Where's that happened?
It was on the north side of Over Easy, what used to be the Thai restaurant.
Right.
It's also been chronic near forget which street. It's where Relentless Bicycles is.
Right.
On the
Okay.
and that one, it's a drain on the north side. The Easy Over, it's a drain on the south side of Lucerne. But it's I've sent it. I remember sending the concern to Sam Hetty, so that's a while back. They said they poured some chemical down it, but it didn't fix the problem.
Okay, Jamie will take a look at that.
Yeah, J and K. I'm already going to shoot something over to Storm. so they can TV those and see what's going on.
What else on the agenda do folks want to talk about?
As
Anything?
my
No?
mother would say, don't all answer at once.
It's all right. No, if that's,
I just wanted some consensus on a presentation that I wanted to see if I could get consensus from everyone before they could be booked by Melissa.
Yeah.
There's a foundation that is called the Beach Bucket Foundation, and they put up a beach bucket display at the beach to help removal of trash debris. And the gentleman approached me and would like to do a presentation. Well, he doesn't really want to do the presentation. He's just like, how do I get to the beach? And I was like, well, you got to do a presentation to the city. And he's like, I don't really love that. His name's Andrew. But he said he would put something together with the help of some of his volunteers and come down and have a conversation with us. Now, they do have one at Phipps Park.
right.
I brought this forward about 3 years ago to our previous leisure services director, who told me, well, you know, there's ones at the other end of the park and people can just use those. I think this is a great,
I think it's a great idea.
so I need a consensus before Melissa would let them go on the agenda for a presentation.
I have no problem.
I'm looking for consensus.
And they actually have a stand, it's a nicely built stand at John Prince Park also, even though it's not a beach, but you know, the concept is
I
the
know,
same.
it's a great concept. I don't,
Yeah.
anybody, Ronaldo, you want to pipe in on that?
Yeah, thank you. I know Andy really well. I talked to him. Actually, he was at the State of the City, and when I've brought this up before, the thing that he had hesitancy about was our liability release. And so we chatted a bit more about it, and he's talking with, or should be talking with, Tiana to work it out. I mean, if he wants to do a presentation, I know why he doesn't want to. That's not usually his forte. But if he wants to do a presentation, or somebody wants to do a presentation on their behalf, I think that'd be fun. But it should be getting worked on, and it's basically, the limitation is, if there is a limitation, is an understanding of our release. But
Yeah, I
it's a
guess we should
phenomenal
find out what other
project. If you
cities have
talk to him
done.
about it, I mean, the big concern that people always reflexively say is, oh, if you put buckets out there, fishermen are going to steal them and blah, blah. And actually, if you talk to him, that rarely happens. And the one that's close to us, the one that's in Chrysler Park, this was a while ago when he said this, but he said that's the only one where a bucket has never been stolen. And even
That's
if
Palm
it,
Beach.
and I'm like, all right, Lake Worth, thank you. But even when that does happen, it's you know, it's so relatively low cost that he said it's not really a concern.
Do we need a, I mean, it's such a, Sarah, it says, what if we did it as an agenda item to approve it? And he comes and, you know, gives presents there rather than do a whole, because I think we're all on board with it. I don't think.
Whatever. I mean, like I said, I didn't want him to waste his time if we didn't have support across the whole commission of going through all the stuff that he needs to go through in the back end and waste staff's time.
Yeah,
And
no,
we all agreed that anything that we want to bring forward, we have to get consensus on. So
Yeah.
that was, I had two things and that was one of them. So however staff wants to work it out, if they want to see if they can work out agreement, then bring it forward. Because it seems like we have a majority, and I'm sure if Mimi was here, she'd probably support it. Not that we've had a conversation about it, but just knowing Mimi. And then my other conversation is, we really don't have a policy in regards to when people want to have us abandon right away or buy the adjacent property. And there's multiple things that are happening, and I'm sure that we've all gotten the same email about the people over off the Intercoastal who are having major issues with 13th Avenue South.
yeah, it's horrible.
So we really don't have, you know, to me, I think we need to have a policy that's, here's how much we pay for square foot, charge for square foot, or how many appraisals do they need, or do we need access? And something a little more easily black and white for staff to be able to respond to these requests. Because as we saw the last time we had somebody come forward, they wanted to take a tiny piece of parcel that was non-buildable and claim that they were going to make it a dog park, which really you couldn't make it a dog park. And the person who had the adjacent property is the one who ended up purchasing it. I just think that we need a little more clarification for the public and for us on how to navigate those waters. And we really should be looking at, and I had this conversation with Jamie and Troy last week. We are really bad stewards of a lot of these tiny parcels and pieces of the alleyway when
We
it
don't
comes.
use them. We don't
use them, we don't maintain them. And to me,
Nope.
as we have access to the utilities, if there is a utility line even there, I think that we need to start, going out and asking the property owners, are you interested in purchasing this from the city? Asking both, adjacent properties, seeing if they have, any interest, and really getting this off of our maintenance list and letting the people who are already surrounding that property be the first people to say, yes, I'll purchase it. Here's what I want to do. But we really don't have an easily navigation for that, right? It's kind of all over the place. So I just wanted to see if we had consensus on that.
Well, I think that's a great idea. I mean, the people, I have been dealing with the people, the poor people at 13th Avenue South. Almost since I got elected, I have been trying to get them in, forward. And I mean, it's a piece of property that we don't use, we don't maintain. No kayaker has ever tried to get in there. And these people can't go in their backyard because they've got homeless people having sex and pooping. It's terrible. So I think one of those is coming. Jamie, is that coming up? Is that coming to us?
Yes, it is. There
Okay.
are multiple. Some obviously are interior to the city. Some are access to our intercoastal, to the Lake Worth Lagoon. And again, we're bringing these forward because it's one of those kind of case by case basis. You guys will have to make a decision. And do we want to have a different? Again, it's kind of a policy. Do we want to allow access on these right of ways that lead to the lagoon, or do we not? Or do we want
Well,
to?
my feeling is we're not, again, this particular piece of property, which I'm very familiar with, and both people want to, get the people on either side want it, very clearly. We don't take care of it. We say to them, too bad, you got people living, homeless people living next to you. It's a public property, so it's the kind of place that if we're coming under that new law, are we allowing them to stay there if we don't every day force them off? So, Ronaldo, what say you?
Yeah, it's certainly a long-standing problem. I wonder if Troy has an update because the other week we should have sent I believe we sent some crews to do a little bit of cleanup on some of those, but there's a number of them. I mean, like the sidewalk that's near Lakeside Palms Court is another one that it's like these are they're useless to the city. There's no other way to describe it. These are properties that are absolutely useless for us to hang on to. There's no chance of infrastructure of any kind going on them. And yeah, it's a problem. As far as, I think we should be reaching out to every single one of them. I know I have some of the issues that you find are sometimes the neighbors don't agree on what needs to happen with those properties. So it can be a little bit complicated, but I am glad that over the last few months, I know staff has been bringing some of these properties all throughout the city, not just along the lagoon. But some of these properties are like the size of a dinner table. It's like, why do we?
I remember the whole thing about
Why?
yeah,
So yes, it's something that I think we need to really systemically address, and maybe the ones along the lagoon that have these security issues should be prioritized. I mean,
I would. I mean, these people. I mean, they were told like 2 years ago, don't even apply. We're not doing it. I think yes, I agree with the policy, but if that, I'm going to tell you right now, if that particular item comes before us, I'm voting us off the island. I'm voting that they should get it because those poor people have been under siege. Chris?
And just to answer the applications weren't being accepted for a while, but for more than maybe half a year now, it can be applied for. So
Right,
maybe
but
we need to help people do that process.
yeah, and the applications kind of sat there for a while. Chris?
Yeah, I would just put in a request, I guess, to staff that somebody prepare a map. I think we have a GIS person, so it'd probably be pretty easy to do, that would show us our full length of coastline along the Lake Worth Lagoon and, highlight in red or whatever, yellow or green or something, Where there is public access and where there is not along that full length, because I certainly hear some of the concerns about, highly inappropriate and really problematic use for the neighbors. I think that is a valid concern, certainly. But I also think there is a valid concern that we as a city should make the lagoon as accessible as possible. And that's where the map comes in. If there's a right of way that 2 houses over has a park that, has access to the lagoon, well, then that right of way is not really limiting access to the lagoon, and maybe it's fine to turn it over. Or if that's not the case, and there are long stretches where there is no access, maybe we need to think about, is there a way that we can physically orient this thing that avoids the problems but still allows the public access? And what I'm thinking of seeing in my head is being over in Naples, and I wandered into some neighborhood, and every single street that was perpendicular to the coast was a public access to the water, to the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of whatever. And they seemed to figure out how to do it, but they had made a commitment that they wanted that public access, that you could just walk down and see the water. And I see the one that, even though it doesn't have very good access to the water, it does have visual access. I think it's either 18th or Wellesley or both, that a lot of people in the community just come and hang out at sunset time, or come see it. So it depends on what it looks like and how it's managed. So I'd like to see that map as a backup to any discussion we do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I thought that was in the works actually, but and in terms of, it would be nice to have a lot of money to spend on that kind of thing, but I think if we're talking about infrastructure, we need to pay attention to like potholes before we do, people, the few people that want to kayak, having every access that they possibly can. Okay, so if it, like I said, if it comes before, I would encourage us, if 13th Avenue South comes before us, even if we don't have an overall policy, I think this one should be approved, because the city's not maintaining it. No, the city's not maintaining it or policing it. So these people really have been under siege now for a couple of.
I agree with you, Mayor, but at the same time, knowing that it's public land, I am not in favor of just giving it away. This
No,
is,
we'll
this is
figure out, maybe do.
however
costs.
many, appraisals we need to do, or, obviously it's going to increase their tax basis a little bit. But, knowing that it's public land and trying to be a good steward, I just want the people who are listening to know that we're not just going to give away waterfront property.
And
well, I think if we're talking about it's not like giant fields of waterfront property. I think it's a 20-foot strip or something. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but again, these people have been applying for the past couple of years. Let's not raise the bar for them at this point. That's my feeling about it. And it's not a good practice. Okay, try an abandonment, because we've had abandonments, and but now that you've applied and have asked and it's never been a law, now we're going to have a new law. So I think that's unfair to them.
could
Jamie,
I get
Jamie's
consensus?
hand is up. Jamie's hand is up, but he's muted. So it's Jamie, you're muted.
I'm sorry, it didn't click off. I was going to mention that we do have a city attorney on. So I was going to ask Elizabeth if she could maybe mention what that process would look like, because as the vice mayor mentioned, we wouldn't just want to give these right-of-ways. They are public access. So as far as what that process would look like, Elizabeth, are you there? I see your name on the screen.
She better not be billing us if she's not there.
Well, if she's not there, we will we'll get some answers for you, but obviously we couldn't just
I'm here. Sorry, I couldn't figure touching the wrong things.
Okay, you're back on the clock.
So yes, there are some limitations to what you can do so far as charging, and we can put information together for you on that.
Okay.
And there is currently an application process, and so we do follow that. You have right now in your code, there is a bit of a process, but it can be more fully developed either in your code or by policy through, whatever you all want to direct. And when you abandon property, it goes equally to the property owners on either side, depending on plats. Typically, generally speaking, in the city, most of the properties are all part of the same plat, so that isn't usually an issue. And we'll need to look at your code and your fee schedule and make sure that whatever you all determine that you want to, how you want to set the rates, that it's in one place and it's consistent. And I think right now there's something in the code and maybe or maybe not in your fee schedule as well. So we'll look at that.
Okay, great. But I don't want to torture these poor people more than they have already been.
And Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
If I could add, so there are, and I've heard a lot from residents who live not right on that right of way, but like across the street and stuff. So there is
Yeah.
a good amount of people saying that they would not be in favor of this. So just want to make sure everyone is aware that there are people that say they do go back through there. We have had PBSO increasing their patrol down some of those right of ways as well, but we never tell people what they should or shouldn't do with their property. But for instance, if I had a property right there, I would add some lighting in my backyard and just kind of make it, so it wouldn't be super dark back there or invite people to kind of go hang out back there.
It's
So
our property and we're not maintaining it.
No, I'm talking about, well, keep in mind, some of the properties that are adjacent to some of these right of ways are not fenced.
Right.
So on some of these right of ways, you have mangroves and stuff at the end of them. So even if you wanted to put a kayak in or something, you couldn't do it straight from the right of way. You would then have to either go north or south, or if there's no fencing there, and you kind of trespass and walk across someone's property to get access to the water. But again, you can't tell people to do their property, but if there is a fence down the property line, that kind of stops that issue. If there was lighting back there, that kind of makes it not as appealing for people to be back there. But, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. There is some opposition to the city just giving these away. So I just want to make everyone aware of that.
I've spoken with some of those folks in the past. And I understand that, but I also think that, they're not living with the nightmare that is the homeless. I don't know who was first, Chris?
Yeah, I just, two things. One, could I get consensus that before we bring this to a commission meeting, that part of the backup be a map, as I requested, of the various forms of access?
I would not go for that, because these people have just tried and tried and tried for so long.
So you don't even want to make, you don't even want to make that information available to us for.
I'm not saying to make it available. But I don't want to hold these people off until that happens. And if it can happen at the time that the thing comes on the agenda, fine.
Okay, I'm making a formal request, a very simple map, can be a satellite image, can be whatever, mark off the public access, the right-of-ways that we own, the parks, so that we can be making an informed decision of where these are.
Jamie already said he was going to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can just actually get that done through our GIS department.
Yeah, exactly.
But I can just email that out to all of you, even ahead of even having something on the agenda, so you guys just already have that information. And then when you come forward, we can add those.
Yeah, but I'm not going to hold. I don't want to hold these people up anymore.
And the other side of it is, I think we should be very conscious as an elected board of what Jamie just said, that the owners on either side have choices of things that they do on their own property that can have an influence of what happens in the public part of it. And that should be part of the picture of what is done, whether it's fencing, whether it's vegetation, whether it's lighting, or all of the above. Also, there certainly, it doesn't have to be major money on infrastructure. It can also, in some cases, depend, it's going to vary from place to place, but it might simply be vegetation trimming that solves half the problem. So
thank you. Ms. Ronaldo?
Thank you. I would say I think it is important to look at the thing as a whole, as a system, only because we do have to address these case by case. And like Jamie pointed out, some of them are going to have resistance, others aren't. Some of them, the neighbors themselves are going to quarrel with each other over what to do with it. Because the reality is each one is very different. And some of them are, there's one that is literally just a sidewalk with fences on both sides, and they would be okay with putting, the last time I talked to them, they would be okay with putting a coated gate on it at their expense if it was theirs, right? So it wouldn't be a significant change. But we do got to think about all of them, because if we encounter one where people do say, "Hey, I go and look at birds or whatever in the morning, and I live across the street or whatever," we do have to hear those neighbors as well. And if we look at it systemically and as a whole, we can say, well, we could probably identify maybe a more appropriate place or something that we could get on plan to better develop.
Well, this one is 3 blocks south of South Palm Park, so there's certainly adequate. I want to look at the
I know.
water.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, anything else on the agenda that we want to take a look at? We've got 4 minutes. There's other things I want to talk about. Right, I've heard nothing else about the agenda. Bryant Park is a problem. I met with Jamie and the captain the other day. It's getting worse and worse. People are pooping in the park. People are, it's a problem, and I don't know how to fix it. And Sarah's talked about having a dedicated staff for Bryant Park, for the parks. I think Bryant Park is the worst, serious problem, but I think we need to figure out how to address this. And the sheriff's office is patrolling it, but we asked them to do that more. We have, we've got this new law that, again, the homeless people staying in the park, we're not supposed to rouse them. I don't know where they're supposed to go, but that's not the legislative problem. Ronaldo?
Thanks for bringing that up. It was a good reminder. I had a conversation yesterday with someone who lives across the street from the park, and it was a really good conversation. One, they're super happy about the check valves that we're putting in, because they pointed out how at the base of the bridge where they live, it's no longer getting flooded like it once was on King High Tide, so that's good. But the other thing they pointed out that I thought was really interesting, and I never thought about it because most of us just drive by there, is not Bryant Park, but the park that is at the base of the bridge with the fountain, the little circle and the little walkway fountain. Apparently, the interior lights that are in that park are timed to come on at 10:30 at night.
Oh,
And he pointed out for those same reasons and security, it might be better to have the timer come on closer to sunset so it's not as dark. Because I think little things like that worked out. We changed the lighting schedule for Bryant Park itself. And I think that may have helped in some areas, but yeah, if we can
that's an easy fix for that park.
Yeah. Little stuff like that, I think helps contribute.
Okay, Chris, real quickly, we're really running out of time.
Yeah, I think as we talk about Bryant Park, we should be very specific about what and where, because I go to Bryant Park for 2 hours at a stretch multiple times a week. I'm there and I can see who's using it. It's a very wide range of people, older people, younger people, strollers, not strollers, babies, people walking dogs. I see zero problems where I am in the park, and I'm in the middle of it, a little bit north of the playground at the bottom and south of the bandshell. And I just see lots of use. I see zero problems. I occasionally see PBSO come by, some other staff. And I see people, I'm there with seniors who are in theory very vulnerable, people who are lying down on the grass as part of their meditations or yoga classes, and no problems. So let's be very specific about where you think there's a problem and what that problem is, because I get a little frustrated that we say, oh, Bryant Park is terrible. It's not. It's very well used. There's a lot of people. It's not a desert by any means. And
No.
people are not having a problem, at least in the portion where I am. Now,
Well,
I know it might be
God
different
bless you.
down at the playground, but that doesn't seem to restrict people using the middle portion of it at all. And I can see all the way up to the pump station, and I can see down to the parking lot near the
Well,
playground.
When I
So
hear from staff, and I hear from other people calling me, and I hear from the captain about, yes, people are shitting in the park. The bathrooms closed at night. People, I mean, if we want, we can open it up and say, hey, you know, have people come in at unagended items and say the problems they've been having. I mean, how nice that, I mean, I'm not disputing that that's your experience, but that's not everybody's experience. So
that's why I say it's important for us to be specific of where and what the problems are, because these generic statements about Bryant Park simply are not valid. They're not accurate. If
Okay.
people were pooping all
Okay.
over, most people don't like to put their yoga mats on poop, and it's not been a
So
problem.
maybe there's an area that's not, but there's enough of an
big
area that there's a problem.
Big area that's fine, and I see people biking through, walking through, and they're coming, you know, through a big part of the middle. So let's just be careful and accurate as much as possible.
So Jamie, can you have our people specify on a map where they're finding shit in the park, please?
And I love that we're asking for accuracy.
Right. Yeah. Where's yeah. All right, never mind. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. I think it's time, you know.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
We
Yes.
did start about 10 minutes late. I don't know if everyone has to get going right now, but I did have
Oh,
two
do you have
things.
something you'd like to talk? Well, we only started late.
And I have two things, Madam Mayor.
Okay, well then we'll go for a few more minutes. It's really coming on at 9 o'clock is important. Okay, so what's up?
Well, we kind of glossed right over it, but Melissa did send out that update to the agenda for next Tuesday. There wasn't much
Oh.
on that utility agenda
Right.
for this month, so we did put those items on next Tuesday's agenda, so that's why those were added. They're pretty simple, just operational things, so we didn't think it was that big of a deal. But just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Those items were added for next Tuesday's meeting. And the other thing was in talking with DOT about DOT earlier, Mayor, you had mentioned the trees. So I wanted to kind of give everyone an update. So obviously, a lot of those, well, some of those have been hit in the past. Some were removed. DOT's position is that they do not want to put trees back in, just from a maintenance standpoint and from a safety standpoint. What they're going to allow us to do is basically we can, if we choose to, put trees in.
Where are they? Do you know the specific areas that we're talking about?
Yeah, these are the ones like right on the corners and everything. So these aren't the actual bulb outs in the street. These are the ones that are actually in the like by the sidewalk. So if the city's going to be doing these, obviously they're wanting to do palms because you just have a large root ball. And I know everyone talks about shade trees and everything. From the city standpoint, I mean, a perfect example is the oak right by Dave's. It is a constant struggle where we're trimming the roots because it pops up the actual pavers themselves, the root system, and just creates trip hazards. So in this particular area in our downtown, while the shade trees would be nice, I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention. We're currently looking if the city's going to do this and we're going to fund this to put these in, so we just don't have pavers and we actually have trees in, we would be looking at palms. So I wanted to make sure that was brought up, because I know some people say, yeah, but we want shade trees. But
Right.
look what's out in front of Dave's. So we want to eliminate having to do an amendment to the interlocal where we would now be responsible for fixing Lake and Lucerne, which are FDOT roadways, because the root system is now ruining the subgrade and causing issues on the roadway.
They're not going to take down the tree. What happened? My computer just.
Take down the what?
They're not going to take down the tree in front of Dave's, are they?
No, we're dealing with that tree. It's just a constant, that's one of the areas twice a year we have to deal with fixing trip hazards because of the interlocal we currently have, which will go on in perpetuity. Because for some reason, a long time ago, people thought it'd be great for us to take on the maintenance of DOT right away. So we are.
My screen just.
And that's why
I just want to see. Wait,
take-
my screen just went blank. I can't see anything.
We can see and hear you though, Mayor.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, we can see and hear you.
And
It's
to me,
blind.
to me, that's why we have to have the conversation about really moving forward and just, if we're gonna be responsible for replacing trees, for the parking, for enforcement, I would really like us to have a hard conversation on what that would look like for us to take Lake and Lucerne from FDOT.
I would support having that conversation. Obviously, we'd need to know, the finances of it. What are we looking at for purchase or probably not purchase, but for maintenance? What are we doing now? What are they doing now? What kind of money?
I have
But
those numbers
I
from a few
agree.
years ago.
Yeah, I think that it's, if we can get that updated, Jamie, because, at this point, we wouldn't pay for it. We talked about they would just give it to us, but we have to have a maintenance plan.
It wasn't they would give it to us. What the issue was a few years ago is we had looked at acquiring Lake and Lucerne, and there were a couple different situations. One was basically the entire stretch from A Street at the traffic circle all the way to Gulfview. Then we had looked at just from Dixie to Federal. Then we had gone a little bit further east or further west. So we had looked at different segments of what that would look like. And at that time, they had not put the repaving, the Triple R project they're doing right now in Lake and Lucerne. They did not have that on their work schedule yet. So we looked at how much that was going to cost to do in the engineering it was going to cost to kind of put those plans together and said, this is what we would require as far as payment to do that. And they basically came back with a fraction of that. So it made no sense for the city back then. With it now being repaved and then finishing up that project now, we can easily start those discussions again. I would just throw out there that our current infrastructure budget is not enough to even maintain the linear footage of roadway we currently have in the city. And adding a large stretch of Lake and Lucerne, which we would now acquire, meaning that 20 years from now, we would now be responsible for also repairing that and doing that next time it's due. I just want to throw out there that, we're having issues just maintaining our existing roadways. So we might want to look at how we address that from a financial standpoint.
Well, and especially if we can.
Before we start acquiring more.
Well, we also need to look at things like mobility fees or impact fees if we own those roads, and what the benefit would be versus the county and the state getting money that we never get back.
Yeah.
Yep. And we should look at, as developments come in and add traffic to it, should they not in some fashion contribute to the maintenance costs? On the trees, I would guess that almost every city in South Florida has shade trees at some portion of their downtown areas, which to me suggests that there is some way of doing it compatible with roads. I'm not a tree root specialist. I'm not a road specialist. But the fact that many, many other cities have decided that shade is a big deal and is worth it suggests to me that there are ways of growing oak trees or other trees. It could be a mix of trees, but things other than palm. I seem to remember that our landscape ordinance, in fact, is quite clear about not wanting palms because they do not provide benefits. They also are a bit of a health risk when big fronds fall off of them. Falling on sidewalks is not a great idea. But they don't provide any significant shade, and a decent shaded, everybody knows, a decent shaded street increases property values, decreases heat island effects, makes it a lot more comfortable for outdoor sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say I would not in any way approve replacing them with palms. Let's get some information. How do other places do it so it works with the road? Because it's clearly possible to do.
You're absolutely correct. It would just strictly be aesthetic as far as palms are concerned, because that would look better than just going back in with straight pavers. What you see in a lot of other cities, they have a much wider right of way. So you can get those further off the roadway. So they weren't right on the back of curb and that close to the actual drive aisle or the parking aisle. So that's where you'll see some of the larger shade trees because you're not right on the edge of the pavement. We just don't have a wide right of way.
But I also see very narrow, what we call zero lot line developments that manage to put in shade trees. They don't grow as an open grown, field grown tree. They need to get trimmed next to the building and stuff like that. But you wind up with quite a bit of shade, even on, a 3 foot wide thing.
I will say a lot of those locations, they have a much, I'll say a much more robust budget in terms of maintenance in their downtown and what they're able to do. And I'll just gotta throw it out there. There is a revenue stream from something in their downtown that allows them to do increased maintenance and increase their level of service. And I know people don't like to hear it, but that's what things like paid parking programs and stuff like that in your downtown, that's what they allow you to do. They allow you to increase your level of service, which means more pressure cleaning, more trimming, more emptying of everything, more bringing your level of service and the cleanliness of your downtown. Things like that bring revenue in that area to allow you to do more things like that. But we haven't had that discussion yet, but just kind of throwing that out there. If we want to look at doing shade trees and kind of doing these things and increasing the appearance, we're going to at some point, as of right now, we have the same funds coming in operationally year after year.
But
so it's hard to keep increasing level of service if we're not increasing our revenue.
I understand. I would also put on that in making these kind of decisions, it's got to be a balance, the cost and the benefit.
Yep.
And everybody will tell you that the benefit to sidewalk cafe environment of shade trees is huge. The benefit of shade trees in a residential neighborhood bumps up property values by known amounts, and
Yep.
it's not insignificant. So there's clearly an advantage to doing it. How one figures out how to finance it, how much maintenance is needed, those are things that it ought to be possible to find out.
Yeah,
and don't move forward with palm trees because we haven't pursued the other options.
And that's why I'm bringing it up now. I didn't want palm trees to start popping up downtown and then start getting calls. Where do these come from? So
You will.
That's why I want to have the conversation now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we all want, I mean, I would love our streets to be shaded like Coral Gables. That would be fabulous, but there's a much wider streets, but we do what we can. And again, we still have some basic needs that we are not fulfilling. So, I mean, and I am the shade tree. I live in the forest, right? But we have to take care of our basic stuff first. If you know, and right now federal grants seem like they're going to be hard to come by. Things like shade trees. But I don't think Chris, nobody disagrees with you about the value of shade. It's a practical, I think from Jamie's point of view and from staff point of view, and for our fiscal responsibility point of view, we have to be mindful of the cost.
And my main thing is I just don't want to, you know, line downtown with large trees, and then when we don't have the revenue or the ability to up our level of service, and all the calls start coming in about, you know, the trip hazards and the pavers are doing this and they're sinking or they're popping up because of the root system and all these things, and we're not getting to them as fast as we need to, or we're not able to address a lot of the other issues as fast as we need to. It's kind of like we're setting ourselves up for failure in some sense. So if we're going to invest in this, we just need to make sure that we also on the back end are set up properly from a maintenance standpoint.
So in 15 years, people don't say, why did they plant these trees? It was stupid because now we have to cut
and
them down.
nobody's going to say in 15 years, why did they plant trees? They're going to say in 15 years, why didn't they plant them 20 years earlier?
We're not talking about the entire city, Chris. We're talking about a very limited area. We're talking about
the downtown. The downtown.
Yeah, and I will say, look at the big tree right outside of Dave's, because people trip on that all the time. We try to box off, even to the point that we're having to prune those roots sometimes, not even the proper way, but we have to from just a safety standpoint, because those pavers multiple times a year are popping up and creating hazards. So, you know, we're having to kind of do something that's not standard. But when you look at that whole root system there, that's what we're going to get.
Is there a way to trim roots as a tree grows so that doesn't happen? Ronaldo, I see
you can definitely
Ronaldo's got his hand up. Let's let Ronaldo talk.
Yeah, you can root prune trees. It's definitely a little bit more of a challenge, especially when they're like more settled, but it is doable, and ideally you do it as they're growing.
But if they're under pavement, that's a challenge.
That's the issue. And then once that root ball is formed, it's a challenge. I've had this conversation a lot with Dave. But yeah, I'm glad this came up because you know, I think, and I always pay attention to this when I walk through our downtown. Some of our oak trees, like the root balling, is significant, but there's space, and there's like in some places there's space to, like, you know what some people do, you raise up, you know, almost like build a little curb around it and make it like a planter so people don't trip around it. The Dave's one though, that one, it's a challenge, and believe me, I'm big into saving trees, but that one is I think we do need to, you know, talk to some experts to see what we could do to save that tree. But that one specifically is certainly a challenge because it's a liability for us in terms of how that pavement is. But for the rest of downtown, I think we have a good amount of space on most of them, to really develop something that's unique. Not just the shade trees, but there's ways to kind of like when you do have this space to break it up a little bit. And you know, some people do flowers with, like, you see it all a lot where you have the little, like New York is famous for having those little wrought iron tiny fences that are like this tall.
That is so
And
easy to trip over.
that's so easy to trip over. Yeah. So there's more, like, more visible ways of doing basically that and making it nice, and having areas that will take in some rainwater, because
Right.
that's really why a lot of these trees are doing that. It's because they're so constricted, they're not getting sufficient water because they're surrounded by pavement. So they're kind of like default fix is to do that.
Going, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, and how many, I mean, how many, not a pop quiz, but I wonder how many of the, you know, spots downtown we're actually talking about. Is
I believe
every-
it was either 17 or 19. I was looking at.
Are they talking about cutting down the trees?
No, they're not talking about cutting down. These are where you would have just the stamped concrete or
Could we
some type
get
of-
a diagram, just an idea of like a map of where those are?
Yeah, Shannon already has that. She's already
Okay, if
marked
she
all
could
those.
share that, that'd be easy. That
Yeah,
would
she's
be
got all
cool.
that. So
And
I
maybe we
can
can treat some of them differently than others too. That, you know.
yeah, we'll get working on that so I can bring that forward to everyone. And Commissioner Diaz did mention, so just in case everyone had not heard, Dave McGrew did pass away last week.
Yes, tomorrow's the service.
Yeah. So
But
just making
thank you
sure
for
everyone was
mentioning
aware.
that.
Yeah.
Tomorrow at Phipps Park, I think.
Yeah.
Croydon
So
Park.
that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Melissa.
Just very quickly, I know you had all spoken about donating to the Street Painting Festival for a square. It's $500, which would be $100 from each of your discretionary funds, and I just wanted to get consensus to move that forward.
I'm good
Yep.
with that.
Yep.
Ronaldo?
Okay,
Sarah?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
all right, thank you, that's it.
thank you very much. Anything else before we go? All right, so it's 10:15. Yeah, tomorrow morning, I think at 11 o'clock is the thing for Dave. I need to look that up. And
If somebody could share that around
it's
by
on
email.
Facebook. It's on Facebook in a number of places.
All right.
And I think, yeah, I've seen it a number of times. I haven't written it down, but yeah. Have a great weekend, everybody. There's something going on with Mango Grove this weekend. Mango Neighborhood Association's having something, I think, on Sunday. But that's all I know. Have a great weekend, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Okay.